They told him the same thing every time. It's not working out. Not angry, not dramatic, just calm words that ended another chapter of his employment. The first time he got fired, he thought it was a misunderstanding. The second time, he blamed the company. By the third time, something started to feel wrong inside him, like a question he didn't want to answer. By the seventh time, he stopped arguing altogether. He just nodded, collected his things, and walked out quietly. No one tells you how heavy repeated rejection feels. It doesn't explode in your life at once. It builds slowly, like dust in a closed room. At first, he tried to stay positive. He told himself every job was a learning experience. But after each firing, the confidence that he was just unlucky started to fade. He began to notice a pattern that he didn't want to admit. Different companies, different roles, same result. He wasn't lazy. That was never the issue. In fact, he worked harder than most people around him. He stayed late, asked questions, tried to improve, but somehow things never clicked. He would misunderstand instructions, miss small details, or struggle to adapt to fast-paced environments. Managers would initially appreciate his effort, but over time, patience would turn into frustration. After the third firing, he started doubting himself deeply. After the fifth, he stopped telling people he had a job until he was sure he could keep it. After the seventh, something inside him broke in a different way. Not in a hopeless way, but in a questioning way. He started asking a different question entirely. Instead of, why am I failing at jobs? He began asking, why do all these jobs feel wrong for me? That question changed everything. For a while after the seventh firing, he didn't rush into anything new. He took odd jobs just to survive. Delivery work, small freelance tasks, anything that didn't require long-term commitment. It gave him space to think, something he hadn't had in years, and in that space, patterns became clearer. He noticed something important. In every job he lost, the structure was rigid. He was expected to fit into systems that didn't account for different ways of thinking. He wasn't bad at working. He was bad at fitting into systems that didn't match how his mind worked. That realization didn't immediately fix his life, but it shifted his direction. Instead of trying to fix himself to fit into jobs, he started thinking about building something where the structure could adapt instead. At first, the idea sounded unrealistic. He didn't have funding, he didn't have connections. He didn't even have a clear idea of what business to build. But he had something he hadn't had before, clarity about what didn't work. He started studying simple business models. Not in a formal way, but by observing. He noticed how small problems in daily life were often ignored. He paid attention to inefficiencies, frustrations people accepted as normal. Where others saw inconvenience, he started seeing opportunity. During this phase, he made his first attempt at building something. It was small, almost insignificant. A basic service connecting local workers with people who needed quick tasks done. No complex technology, no big investment. Just a simple idea, reduce friction between demand and supply. It didn't succeed at first. In fact, it barely grew. He made mistakes, underestimated costs, and struggled with consistency. But this time, failure didn't feel like rejection. It felt like feedback. That difference mattered. Instead of quitting, he adjusted. He changed how he approached customers, how he communicated value, how he organized tasks. Slowly, the small idea began to function better. Not big success yet, but movement. The real turning point came when he stopped thinking like an employee trying to survive and started thinking like a builder trying to solve problems. He began focusing on systems instead of effort. In his previous jobs, effort had never been the issue. He always gave effort. But effort without alignment had never been enough. So now he focused on alignment. He studied businesses that scaled. Not just what they did, but how they thought. He noticed that successful companies didn't just rely on hard work. They relied on structure, delegation, automation, and clarity of purpose. He started applying those ideas in small ways. He documented processes. He simplified communication. He removed unnecessary steps. Even in his small venture, he treated it like something that could grow, not just survive. But the road wasn't smooth. There were moments when money ran low. Moments when he considered going back to traditional jobs. Moments when the memory of being fired 7 times returned like a shadow, whispering that maybe this was just another failure in progress. But something had changed in him now. He didn't see failure as proof of incapability anymore. He saw it as information. So he kept going. He expanded slowly, first one city, then another. He reinvested everything he earned back into the system. There were no shortcuts. Growth was steady, not explosive. And that was actually what made it stable. As the business grew, so did his understanding. He realized that the reason many people struggle in traditional workplaces isn't always lack of skill. Sometimes it's mismatch. People are placed in environments that don't match how they think or work. That insight became part of his company philosophy later. Instead of forcing people into rigid roles, he started building flexible structures where different working styles could exist. Some people worked fast, some slow. Some needed guidance, others needed freedom. The system adapted instead of forcing conformity. This approach wasn't common. Many advised him to standardize everything, to control output tightly. But he remembered what it felt like to be judged by systems that didn't understand him. So he chose differently. There were risks in that decision. Flexibility can lead to chaos if not managed properly, and at times it did. Projects went off track. Communication broke down. But instead of reverting to strict control, he refined the system further. He learned that structure doesn't mean rigidity. It means clarity. And within clarity, there can still be freedom. Years passed like that. Gradual growth, constant learning, repeated adjustment. There was no sudden miracle moment. Instead, there was accumulation. Small improvements stacking on top of each other until the scale became visible. At some point, the business was no longer small. It had teams, systems, clients, revenue streams. It had moved from survival mode to expansion mode. And with that expansion came recognition. People who once would have dismissed him started asking how he built it. They were surprised when they heard his past. 7 firings didn't sound like the beginning of a $200 million business, but that was exactly what made his story interesting. Because his success wasn't built on perfection. It was built on persistence combined with adaptation. He didn't succeed because he never failed. He succeeded because he stopped interpreting failure as identity. When the company eventually reached massive scale, something shifted in how he viewed everything again. Money no longer felt like the main achievement. The real satisfaction came from building something that worked differently from the systems that had once rejected him. He started investing in other founders who had unconventional paths, people who didn't fit traditional hiring molds, people who had been overlooked. He understood them in a way others didn't. He often said something simple when asked about his journey. He didn't say he was special. He didn't say he had a secret strategy. He said something closer to the truth of his experience. That sometimes you don't fail because you are incapable. You fail because you are trying to succeed in the wrong environment. And once you understand that, the goal changes. It's no longer just about getting accepted. It becomes about finding or building the right space. Looking back, the 7 firings didn't feel like separate failures anymore. They felt like one long lesson he didn't understand at the time. Each job removed something that didn't belong in his path. Each rejection pushed him closer to a different direction, even though it didn't feel like it then. If he had succeeded in the first job or the second, or even the third, his story might have ended there. Comfortable, but limited. Instead, the failures forced him into a deeper question about himself and the systems he was trying to be part of. That question eventually led to something bigger than employment. It led to creation, and creation is different. Employment is about fitting into something already built. Creation is about building something that fits reality better. The business that eventually reached $200 million wasn't just a financial achievement. It was a structural answer to a personal problem he had lived through. It reflected everything he had learned from rejection, adaptation, and observation. Even then, he never stopped acknowledging the early years. Not as shameful memories, but as foundational ones. He knew that without those 7 firings, he might never have questioned the path he was on. And without that question, nothing would have changed. His journey became a reminder for others, not that failure guarantees success, but that failure can sometimes redirect attention toward a better direction. Not all paths are visible from the start. Some only reveal themselves after repeated misalignment. And sometimes, the thing that looks like the end of your story is actually just the part that forces you to start writing it differently. In the end, the man who was fired 7 times didn't become successful despite his failures. He became successful because he eventually learned how to listen to what those failures were trying to point him toward. And that made all the difference.